This is the Battle of Manassas Depot on
Yes, sir.
Legendary difficulty. It's a pretty easy battle. You have all allied units. Yeah, I now have 2 points into medicine, which is very good. Need to get higher. Yeah, we have about 8,000. The enemy has 12,2. We're outnumbered. It's not 2 to 1, so yeah, it's not that hard. This is kind of a grindy battle because all of the units are terrible and terrible weapons, and you have to fire 8,000 times to do any damage on anyone. And the units are small and fragile. And yeah, when your units get down to about 500 in size, they just don't do very much damage. And there's a very good chance that your officer dies. So I just hide in the corner for the first part of the battle, the upper northern left corner with my force. Wait for the rest of my army to come in. I get some artillery. I just want to advance now to the edge of the wood line, and we're going to just shoot them to death. Killing 12,000 of them with these terrible, terrible infantry units and terrible artillery units is just, it just takes a very long time. So, yeah, I've pretty much sped this up. And yeah, it really makes me miss my army. I was using the supply wagon to try to bait them into attacking for the first, I don't know, however long it was. But they just didn't advance at all. They weren't interested in my general or my supply wagon. So, but at least I started to use the supply wagon as bait. I don't feel bad about that because the enemy has tricked me into, something like 1,200 hours. I cannot count the number of times that I have fallen for the bait of trying to take a supply wagon, and right behind the supply wagon was infantry hidden in the woods, and I got ambushed. It's a trap I just fell for over and over again, particularly when I started playing Ultimate General Civil War, and it took a long time for me to say just ignore the supply wagons, unless you're certain that there is not infantry in support nearby that's going to, unload on you. So, yeah, I don't think the AI uses supply wagons as bait, but it sure did feel like it. So, and I fell for it a bunch of times. So, yeah, I should do more of it than I do. Panda Kraut's really good at using supply wagons to convince the enemy to charge. The enemy will also charge detached skirmishers or skirmishers. Yeah, the trick is just getting him to taking up good positions and getting him to attack you where your condition is favorable. And you can use, it never occurred to me to use generals for that purpose, but again, both Panda Kraut and High Bob do that, and both Panda Kraut and High Bob use the supply wagon to bait the enemy into charging. So, an officer is already wounded. When you take a volley, it's based on the percentage of kills, not the number of kills. So one thing I've noticed when I have units that are 2,500, I almost never lose an officer because the percentage of losses in a short period of time almost never triggers a check, an officer check, to see if an officer is killed or wounded. But with these little units, I've done this once as an experiment. I went into Shiloh, I think is the Union, with every unit at 500. And all the officers were majors because you can buy infinite majors. And man, it was a bloodbath. I mean, the number of officers I lost was just staggering. So yeah, when you have smaller units, you have more officers dead. When you have larger units, you have fewer officers dead. I think I've now gone through several battles in this campaign with oversized units, and not a single officer killed or wounded in several battles. So I'm tucking this into a battle that nobody's going to watch because it's not my core army. Or if they do, they're going to fast forward through it. But I have been thinking about the use of detached skirmishers. I've been thinking about it a lot since the beginning of the campaign. It works. It's an absolute mechanic that works. I choose, it's a single player game, so you can do whatever you want to do. If you want to really lower your losses and really get high kill ratios, the best way to do it, hands down, no question, is shotgun detached skirmishers. It's just a mechanic that just, on Legendary, sets the game on ridiculously easy. And you get results that are completely mind-boggling. And the problem with that is they're also completely unrealistic. The tactics are unrealistic. The mechanic is unrealistic because these muskets didn't fire that way. They were rifled muskets, and they were breech-loading weapons, and they did not fire. They just didn't operate that way. So it's completely unrealistic. So what I choose to do is not machine gun these. Ideally, what would happen is these detached skirmishers would behave exactly the way skirmisher units do. And if you're familiar with either dismounted cav or snipers or actual skirmisher units, that is the infantry, well, there's skirmisher units with the rapid fire short range weapons, which nobody uses. So no one, a lot of people are now thinking, what are you talking about? Because nobody uses them. But the skirmisher units with the short range rapid fire weapons, they block line of sight. And that makes perfect sense. These detached skirmishers should block line of sight. Full stop. Infantry units would not fire through their own detached skirmisher units. So that's kind of the immersion effect is the thing. So it's a single player game. If the mechanic's in the game, you can play it. And that's an individual decision. And what I'm starting to come to is, well, I've said the whole time I'm not using machine gunning skirmishers. I've never got into the habit, and I don't want to do it. I like using detached skirmishers for covering the front of the battlefield before the battlefield for visibility, and then for falling back behind my infantry. This, what I'm doing right now, just feels weird. Why are the detached skirmishers there? If they're in front of the infantry can't fire. If they're on top of the infantry, well, they shouldn't be there. It doesn't make any sense. They could be between the infantry units. That would be okay. Or behind the infantry units, providing rear security. All that makes sense. So, but where they are right now doesn't make sense. So you'll notice I'm using my generals to try to get the enemy to charge. So anyway, I'm talking about this now because, one, I've been thinking about it, and two, this is just an allied unit battle that nobody cares about. But possibly Hi Bob and Pandakraut are watching this, and other people who are thinking about this tactic maybe are watching this, and thinking about how to play their game that makes the most sense. There is, I think Pandakraut addressed this once. I mean, Pandakraut has done some incredible work, and what he did do to try to make this more realistic is there's a 10-minute cooldown on detached skirmishers. So that solves one problem, the machine gunning of detached skirmishers. So if you get into the habit of machine gunning detached skirmishers and you want to get out of the habit, then just turn that feature on in Pandakraut's mod. Both the UI mod and the and of course his complete overhaul, the JNP complete overhaul. So that's a good feature. I find that I never got into the habit of machine gunning detached skirmishers, so it's not a problem. And I really want to use detached skirmishers the way I always have, which is as coverage of the line, as an additional infantry unit. I think, well, I mean, we can't do it. I mean, there's only so. I mean, this original game, this original everything about this game comes from a very, very old mod, way back, way back in the Wayback Machine, going back to Total War, I think, which I was a huge fan of and played thousands and thousands of hours of that game. Yeah, and I remember when Ultimate General Gettysburg came out, and a lot of the flaws that the game has comes from how the game was originally made. So here the enemy does get into melee with me, and I decide to get 2-on-1 against him, bring up my cav. If you get in a situation like this, having your cav just charge and get into melee adds that second unit. Now I'm going to have another infantry unit charge this guy. We're just going to really hurt this guy. And here comes another infantry unit of 1,000. He's firing into the melee. That's going to hurt my cav quite a bit, so get my cav out of there. So this guy, that was a pretty large unit, I think, when he moved forward, but now he's getting shot to pieces. That guy, that's 600. And he's taking canister, so he's not going to do well. I'm going to get on the flank of this guy with my cav. That's why I had the 2 cav on the right, so when he did something like this, I'd be able to hit him in the flank. The AI does not like getting hit in the flank and the rear. Actually, when he takes fire from... to increase your chances of making his units surrender, if he takes fire from multiple directions at once, the odds really, really go up. So... yeah, get 2-on-1, fire from multiple directions, which is why I have detached skirmishers often fire into the melee. Yeah, get my cav out of there. Now I'm in great cover and he's in the open. Anyway, detached skirmishers. So the solutions to this, I don't think they can be done. I've talked to Pandacrat about this, and I don't think they can be done. The easiest solution mechanically, if it could be done, would be that detached skirmishers block line of sight. That would solve it. So you can't have detached skirmishers in front of infantry. You can only put detached skirmishers, I think, on top of infantry if you hit pause, I think. Oh, I made a mistake there. I just automatically detached a skirmisher. I should have let his skirmisher charge into my infantry. That would have been terrific. I just wanted additional... I didn't want to stop his charge, and then as soon as I did it, I noticed it stopped the charge. So detached skirmishers having a zone of control and blocking line of sight is a solution. Unfortunately, it can't be done. The limits of the game itself. So that leaves us with, what do you do? Well, it means that if you want to remove this mechanic, you have to do it pretty much voluntarily. That, yeah, you can detach skirmishers. Here's how I see it. When a unit is advancing, it has detached skirmishers to give visibility, because that's what happened historically. When you encounter the enemy, the detached skirmishers fire, weaken the enemy, and they're driven back. That's what always happens. Sometimes in battles in the Civil War, the Napoleonic era, This would go on for hours, where detached skirmishers would just shoot at each other. And the commanders were trying to get an idea of how the enemy was positioned, where his units were, and so on, so they could then formulate where to attack. So that makes sense. But at some point, the infantry closes with each other, and the detached skirmishers fall back into their units. Now, you might be able to replicate this with, and I think the overhaul mod tries to do this by providing more slots, more unit slots. But what people do with the unit slots is they either have infantry, or they have, I think the idea is that that's supposed to be slots for skirmisher units. Again, problem solved, because skirmisher units you can't do most of this stuff with. A certain number of skirmisher units for every division. That would solve the problem. I think it would largely solve the problem. But they would have to be, like, for every division, 2 skirmisher units, and they would have to be skirmisher units, not snipers, using infantry weapons, not sniper weapons. And when you think about it, the South did have extraordinary scoped Whitworth rifles, which were very, very good. And I think they had 140 of them in the entire Confederacy. And these were individuals. This wasn't a unit. These were individuals who didn't function under the chain of command. They were sort of a separate entity. And they went out and they picked high-value targets and they shot them. And they only fired a few shots in a battle. And it took a fairly long time to reload, but they weren't just firing. They would take a position and then look for high-value targets. So that's completely wrong. Building, a dozen sniper units is, it's farcical. So, yeah, the skirmisher units should have whatever rifles the infantry is using. You get a couple per division, and that would solve the problem. Because skirmisher units block line of sight. So, yeah, I don't know if we can do that. My guess is no. I say we. I can't write code. I don't know how to do it. So, I don't know how to mod. But that is a mechanic that I think would maybe solve the problem. So, until then, what do you do? Well, it's a single-player game. You can do whatever you want. But increasingly, what I'm doing right now, I don't want to do. I've experimented with it. It works great, and I just don't want to do it. I'm going to do it through Second Bull Run, and at Second Bull Run, I get really frustrated with it. It just feels so unimmersive, and also it's tedious, and it's just, the infantry should be exchanging shots with each other and during the battle. And I guess that kind of, on a side note that has nothing to do with detached skirmishers, infantry didn't take positions in forest and fire out of it. They did sometimes. I'm thinking of Antietam, where the South used the woods. If you've ever been to Antietam, go to the area around Dunker Church. There's a wooded area, and it's like a natural trench. It's brilliant. But yeah, so they did make use of wooded area, but they did make use of stone walls, and they did, in defensive positions. But at some point, these guys had to get up, stand shoulder to shoulder, and close with and destroy the enemy. They had to. Getting behind something like that was only temporary. And they didn't consider it ideal. It was something that they did to weaken the enemy, and then they were going to charge and destroy them. Yeah, because my detached skirmishers have been shot up. I'm replacing everybody all at one time, because the units are tiny, so the detached skirmishers are tiny, and they're getting shot to pieces. So I just, I really don't want to do this. What I want to do is use detached skirmishers for coverage of the battlefield. Now, that will mean that your losses will double. I mean, not taking advantage of this mechanic doubles your losses, because taking advantage of this mechanic reduces your losses by more than 50%. So there it is. Yeah, that guy was so little. Yeah, popped him, he shattered. These guys can't shoot at all, but they sure can melee. 2-on-1, get the 2-on-1 advantage. So lure this guy in and pop him 2-to-1. So I'm still thinking about the tactics that I want to use and the rules that I'm going to self-impose. I was thinking about using the detached skirmisher mechanic in a union playthrough to see if I can get, I mean, I forget what I got last time. It was on Legendary. It was something like 7-to-1. I bet you could get closer to 15-to-1 using detached skirmishers aggressively, the way that we know how to use them. And shoot, you get 40-to-1 if you machine gun detached skirmishers. But I don't think I'm going to replay the Union campaign that way. I don't think I want to do it. I think I'm just going to go on to the overhaul mod and give that a shot. Yeah, and I'll rethink all of this. I think I am going to use detached skirmishers in that mod, but I'm going to use them the way that I normally do, which is coverage, not like I'm doing in this battle right now, which is stacking them up. Use them as coverage, use them between infantry units, or use them on the flanks of my army for security, or use them to the rear of my army, which does two things. If the enemy does get into melee, it encourages him to retreat the way he came. If you watch people play the JNP overhaul mod, it has the built-in horrible mechanic that the enemy will retreat in weird directions, like even into the rear of the enemy army, which makes no sense at all and is completely unimmersive and stupid. Infantry, I was in the infantry. Infantry doesn't do that. Infantry stays, units stay part of their chain of command. You stay attached to your parent unit, and infantry does not go retreating into the rear of the enemy army where they have no idea what's over there. Yeah, that's silly. As an infantry officer, that's just, completely wrong. Yeah, every unit when it retreats wants to retreat into the safety of its own rear area, not into the uncertainty of the enemy's rear area. So, and it happens all the time in this game. In fact, it's the reason that I stopped playing Ultimate General Gettysburg. I just rage quit one day when an infantry unit for the 500th time retreated through my line, through my infantry, into the rear of my army and got into melee with artillery. Then I just rage quit and uninstalled the game. So the way to control that is actually detached skirmishers. You keep detached skirmishers behind your line. The enemy will retreat. It's kind of like herding cats. The enemy will retreat away from your detached skirmishers because it sees detached skirmishers as infantry units. So that is a very good purpose to having detached skirmishers, controlling the way the enemy retreats. The other thing you can do with detached skirmishers that is completely legit, I think, is have them fire into melee. So when the enemy charges into melee, if you have a couple of detached skirmishers behind your line, they can fire into the melee and rout the attacking unit. I suppose you could actually have them charge into the melee. That would also be good. But the biggest thing is just making enemy units retreat in the right direction. It does two things. It keeps the game under control, and the second thing it does is it keeps me from rage quitting, which is also a good thing. So anyway, this is what I've been thinking about. If not many people watch these legendary playthroughs, or at least, they're not watching this one. I think people watch the early battles and try to figure out how to get through them, and then pretty much you're on your own. So, I mean, you're off to fight your campaign, whatever it is. And people go back if they have a problem with a battle. Maybe they'll check out what some other folks did. I'm very, very hopeful, though, because the changes that Pandacrout has made so far are just absolutely terrific. The game is so much better with Pandacrout's mod than it is vanilla. In a perfect world, the devs would have put some of their people on this game to keep improving it, to fix problems, to upgrade it, to whatever, add features, add weapons. They would have done the JMP overhaul mod. That'd be a level of difficulty or something. And they didn't. They just stopped. And they're done. And they're making other games. But what I've noticed is this is the game I want to play. I mean, they're making games for... What these game companies do is they know they get the most amount of sales, like the first month, and then sales fall off drastically, and then after a few months, sales fall to almost nothing. They're interested in making sales. That's what they want. And investing a lot of money into this game is not going to give them a huge payoff. I get that. We're depending on the modding community. Not ideal. But again, the great news is what the modding we have a tiny modding community, JNP. What they've done so far is terrific. The mods that exist really improve the game. The options that the game has are now really good with this mod. And over time we'll probably get continuous improvements. They'll never fix the inherent problem of the retreat mechanics. There are things that are probably hard-coded into this game that we will never be able to fix because it's just part of the engine. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge we face now is what to do with detached skirmishers. It's the problem I think about. So I've started to combine units because when units get too small, they don't do very much. So I'm combining units, and hopefully we'll be able to get into melee with these larger units. I'm kind of just running the enemy down now. There's not a whole lot left to him. We shot him up, and We got into some melee, and now we're just running him down, and now it's just a matter of time. I think there's plenty of time, but... So what do you think the right answer is for detached skirmishers? I don't know what I'm going to do past Second Bull Run. I don't know what I'm going to do. I know that I'm going to use detached skirmishers. The question is, what limits am I going to put on it? Yeah, that cav's down to 128. He's doing nothing. Oh, good. Another retreating unit wants to retreat through my artillery. Yeah, the most frustrating thing in the game, by far. These units are so small and so ineffective. Yeah, these tiny units are doing nothing. I mean, just, it's amazing how... There's a unit of 600 and I can't kill him. I'm going to have to, like, concentrate my entire army to kill this unit of 600. Anyway, what restrictions are you going to place on detached skirmishers? What are you going to do? What do you think the right solution is? I'm looking for ideas. I'm looking for the restrictions I'm going to place on myself, on my units, on my army. And I'm going to accept that my army is going to take greater losses. So I'm not going to restart the Confederate campaign. I mean, I had to restart it once because my computer died. I want to finish this legendary campaign and, you know, go on to the JMP, the rebalance mod, and try that. Yeah, I'd just be interested to hear what, at this point, what other people think, because I'd like some feedback. And I think about this quite a bit, and I don't know what the solution is, and I'd like to know what other people do, particularly people who play and don't make videos, so I can't see what they're doing. This last unit just will not die. What time is it? 13:01. Yeah, he's against the edge of the map, and he's in the woods. He's routing. He's in melee, and look at his numbers aren't falling. So at this point, I'm just like, okay, gonna have to rest my army and attack him with roll up the artillery. Yeah, he's in the open now, but yeah, my army's way too tired. Yeah, I'm gonna have to bring my whole army up to take this guy out. Oh, there's one unit with 25 condition. Yeah, and there it is. Okay. 11,000 versus 7,700. 12,000 versus 8,000. He lost 9,000. I lost 3,500. 2.5 to 1. So, okay. Yeah, just a grindy battle. So glad it's over. And we got 55s, so that's good. Couple 20-pound parrots. Very good. Okay, now we're back to our army. We have 2,900 men. Army organization of 9 for the next battle is a must. And yeah, we're going to get the 500 Lamottes. Yeah, have a pretty good number of 55s now. 60 to 65. So that number went up. Fresh recruits. Yeah, quite a bit of them, 60 to 65. So yeah, he went up 9 in army size, manpower pool. Okay, I'll see you in camp. Thank you very much for watching, and let me know what you think about detached skirmishers. Thanks.